anyway, I just wanted to briefly introduce our speaker today. This is Leslie Westbrook, and she's an Ole Miss alum and former Miss Ole Miss. So after graduation, she went on to an extraordinary career in market research, branding, and new product development with some of the top consumer product companies in the world. So she started with Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati. Then she worked for New Product Insights in Kansas City before starting her own company in Maryland. So she helped position and launch many products over the years, including Pampers, Pringles, Dunkin' Donuts coffee, Dairy Queen Blizzard, Quaker granola bars. So the brands on her resume are also incredible. Hallmark, Purina, Coke, Kraft, Johnson & Johnson, Sara Lee, General Foods, Nestle, Max Factor, Ragu, Del Monte, Arm & Hammer, Kimberly-Clark, and the list is endless. So do you ever wonder why the Pringles potato chip can ended up like it did? Or how did Pampers become packaged and positioned when the product was first launched? Or how Tylenol made its comeback? So Leslie's behind all of those things and more, so I'd like for you all to hear the rest of the story.
Thank you. Thank you. You read all the details. I'm impressed.
So the spoilers.
I think it should be on. Yeah. Good morning. I am always so honored and privileged to be invited back to Ole Miss to speak about the world beyond your university experience. And I want to really thank Ole Miss and the Meek School for inviting me to come back. I'm now coming back 3 times a year as an adjunct professor, and I teach a class, a May intersession, called Global Brands. And I see some of my students. Thank you for coming, because you've heard these stories before. Help me. Address me. Is it on? Hello?
Only a former classmate.
Yes, we went high school and Ole Miss together. So is that better? Can you hear me? Can you in the back row hear me?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
Is that a yes? Thank you. Thank you. Well, above all, and let me get beyond that picture. Above all, what I'd like to be for you as students in this phase of your life, getting your education, deciding where your path is going to take you, I like to be a mirror for you. Because 50 years ago, I was sitting where you are, although there was not this gorgeous Overby auditorium. But I was a student here at Ole Miss, and I had an advantage, disadvantage. Young Southern ladies of my era were trained to get a teaching certificate. If you want to go to college, and I hope those of you at this phase of your life, I hope this sounds like the dark ages when I tell you that young ladies in my era were told, if you want a college degree, get a teaching certificate, because you can fall back on that if something happens to your husband. Now let's hope that that really sounds like dark ages advice, because that doesn't exist anymore. But like a good Southern lady, I got my college degree. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Education with a major in English, and I had a teaching certificate. And in 1968, when I graduated, I had a job lined up to teach high school English at Oxford High School. I was going to marry my college sweetheart and go on. And one day, before the wedding, I woke up and I said, this has to be a script written for somebody, not me. And I left. I walked away from everything, and I had an enormous opportunity. I didn't know it at the time. And that's why I want to be a mirror to you, because you have no idea all the things that you're going to be exposed to. And one of my biggest points of advice is stay open. You're going to be trying very hard to figure out where your path in life is, which degree you want. Some of you, I have student meetings, and I've had a number of freshmen who've come to me, and I said, you're already ahead of the game if you have enrolled in IMC. You know that somewhere in integrated marketing communications, you're going to figure out what your interest is and what your path is. But you're already ahead of the game because you're asking questions. You're meeting people, you're stretching yourself, getting out of your comfort zone. And that is one big recommendation I make to you as you go through this important phase of your life. Stay open. As much as you want to figure out where you're going, you want to figure out what your degree is, you want to figure out that first job and what your career is going to be and what's the next step, it will all fall into place. Stay curious, stay open, meet people, ask questions. It's how I stumbled into Procter & Gamble. I was given a battery of tests to see if I had an aptitude for market research. I did. I didn't know it. Today you have Myers-Briggs testing and you have other testing that shows, and there are others that are more specific about what are your talents. I stumbled into Procter & Gamble and they sent me through a 5-week training course. At that time, Procter & Gamble was considered the guru of market research. So I got trained by the best in both quantitative and qualitative research. I spent 3 years with them, and I'm going to go through some case studies to show you how my career developed. I eventually became a consumer research specialist, and then I morphed that into taking consumer insights and turning it into strategic marketing recommendations, because everything begins with the consumer, with your customer, with your target audience. It doesn't matter if you're selling a product, a service, a university, a program like IMC, or journalism, candidates. All those candidates running now to be elected, they have focus groups. Every day, right now, there are focus groups going on. They're trying to figure out, is our message resonating? What else should we be doing? So qualitative research, time immemorial, qualitative research, focus groups, and individual interviews will be the basis of almost everything that is going to happen in your life, everything you interact with, including the people who run our government. Then I joined a small, but I say a mighty, consulting company in Kansas City, Missouri, New Product Insights. And we always had a team, a marketing person, a research person, myself, a consumer specialist, and a creative, somebody who writes concepts and someone who draws the picture to express to our clients what ideas we have for them. And then I started my own company. And another thing, I met one young lady who said to me, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to own my own company. And I said, that is pretty amazing. That's phenomenal that at this point, she's a freshman, I said, let me just tell you, but go to work for other people first. You have to learn from other people. Find your mentors. I had the man who started New Product Insights had been head of market research for General Mills. He moved to Kansas City, he married a young lady there, and he started this company because he felt that the Fortune 500 companies depended on their advertising agencies to come up with new product ideas, and they only wanted advertising revenue. So we created this out-of-house new product idea shop, and all of our clients, Fortune 500 companies, were looking for someone who could come in and didn't have the constraints of budgets, politics, internal politics, because I became the voice of the customer. So whenever we were presenting to the head of Johnson & Johnson and the head of the advertising agency, and they got in an argument about which is really the point of a product that is going, there was one of the biggest was a joint venture between Merck Pharmaceutical and Johnson & Johnson. Pepsid acid reducer was a prescription product, and it was going over the counter it was produced by Merck, and they hired Johnson & Johnson to be the marketing and distribution arm because they were not as into consumer products, over-the-counter, OTC. And so we're in a room in New York. It's the boardroom of the advertising agency. The president of the agency is there, the president of McNeil Consumer and Johnson & Johnson, and they're getting an argument about which is really the right way to advertise this new over-the-counter Pepsi. And I just stood up and I said, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just the voice of the customer." So I didn't have to present my opinion, but that was always the tiebreaker, is to be the voice of the customer. Let me talk about some of the products that I've worked on, and you'll have to forgive me if I get too effervescent. I love this stuff. I feel so fortunate and so lucky to have had this career and to have worked with these kinds of companies and to do something so simple as to conduct focus groups, to look for ideas, and there's this aha moment. One of my favorites, yes, I did work, Procter & Gamble, I was with for 3 years, and then Johnson & Johnson family of companies became my biggest clients over the years of my consulting. But I have to say, one of my favorite stories is Dunkin' Donuts. Now, you have to imagine this is in the 1970s. This is going to be hard for you. Try to imagine a world without Starbucks. Can you, if you have to, close your eyes because you probably can't do it. It's almost impossible. A world without Starbucks, a world without High Point, without Bottle Tree, without The Shelter, without McDonald's coffee, Chick-fil-A coffee. There were 2 major brands sold throughout the nation, Folgers and Maxwell House, to be brewed at home. They're regional brands. A&P has 8 o'clock coffee. They were actually at a grinder in the grocery store. There's chock full of nuts in the Northeast. But we're talking a world without a major source of buying coffee when you're out and about, which all of us are. So in the 70s, Dunkin' Donuts was mainly a shop that sold donuts. And they sold sweet products. Now they have sandwiches and flatbread. They have so many other things. Bob Camersham was the president of Dunkin' Donuts, and we were hired to come up with some new ideas. It sounds simple, sounds pretty obvious. Okay, great, we'll do focus groups around the country. Because let me make a little differentiation between qualitative research and quantitative. Quantitative will always have a place, where there's a standardized questionnaire that will be asked of a random sampling around the U.S., and of course internationally, but let's just take the U.S. And those are statistics that are very important to find out what's going on in a marketplace, to get the real insight into why people buy your brand, what are some ideas for new products. You have to get face-to-face with that target audience, or that buying audience. So, it seems simple. Set up focus groups, representation of the East Coast, West Coast, North, South, Midwest. So, okay, we're going to talk to some groups of loyalists, people who go to Dunkin' Donuts at least once a week. And if they go more often, all the better. But we call those loyalists. And then we go to people who go but infrequently. And people who know about Dunkin' Donuts and they buy the kind of products that Dunkin' Donuts sells, but they don't go for other reasons. They go to competitors. So Bob Camersham, his colleagues, and my colleague is sitting behind the viewing glass. And in the near future, we're going to have a state-of-the-art consumer research lab on this campus. I can guarantee you. I'm going to make sure it happens. But a focus group room where I, as the moderator, sit with my customers, and my clients are sitting in the back room, and they're observing. It looks like a mirror. It's not a see-through glass like that, but it looks like a mirror. But behind it's a viewing glass. And So as we're getting into the focus group, so first of all, I'm talking to loyalists. And when I say, just simple question. So what do you like best about Dunkin' Donuts? What takes you there? What do you buy most often? What kept coming up was coffee. Now, it's surprising to me, but this was decades ago, that somebody in the office was not looking at the sales volume in each of those retail outlets. Nobody noticed that coffee was the biggest seller in most of those because they're thinking, we're a baked goods, we're a sweet shop. They're not paying attention to coffee. That's like water. So when we kept hearing that, there was this aha moment. We said, guys, you've got a best-selling product. It's your coffee. And again, thinking back of a world before Starbucks, before specialty coffees, flavors, you can buy the whole beans, you can buy the ground coffee. We introduced, it's so simple, coffee, Dunkin' Donuts, that's the brand, that's what people were buying, coffee by the pound. It was simple, it was a 1 pound package of brown papers, very simple, already ground, ready to brew at home. And now, the rest of the case about how successful that's been, look at what's part of the logo. It's the coffee cup. And somebody just speak it out if you can remember a tagline for Dunkin' Donuts that's pretty established. What is it? America runs on Dunkin'. What are they talking about? Coffee. They're talking about coffee. It's become the biggest seller yet, and then they expanded like everybody else. They've added all kinds of sandwiches and flatbreads and that sort of thing. But that all came from focus groups, talking to the customer. Quaker Oats. The first granola bar to be introduced was Nature Valley. And Quaker was sort of caught off guard. They had not really looked into that particular form for what they, because what does Quaker stand for? What are they known for? Oats, oatmeal. Nature Valley is from General Mills, which is a cereal company. So they got caught off guard and they said, oh my gosh, this looks fabulous. Now we have to enter, but we want a point of differentiation. So I was hired to do focus groups with people who, at that time it wasn't sure whether it was a breakfast replacement, a convenient breakfast on the go, was it a snack, was it a healthy snack replacement? All that hadn't really settled out yet. However, I set up focus groups around the country, and these are not things you can learn from a quantitative research. Even if you say, what are all the things you like about Nature Valley, what are things you don't like, it's not the same, because I'm talking to people who were buying the granola bars, and at the time it was only Nature Valley. And I talked to users and people who had seen them but not bought them, and then I hand them out, and let's say, please go ahead, have this. I want you to go ahead and eat that. And they bite into it, and all these crumbles are everywhere on the table. Now, I might have eventually gotten to that product characteristic that was going to open a big door for Quaker without giving them that product to bite into. I don't think it would have come up as big a negative as it really was. So they're saying, oh, wow, this tastes good, and I like the crunch, but look how messy it is. But we also learned from people who are what we call trier rejectors. They had tried Nature Valley, but they weren't buying it again, or they weren't buying it frequently, and we found out not everybody likes that extreme crunch. So our opportunity, so the point was not only to talk to the customer, to understand the pros and the cons, to look at the marketplace, what are the benefits, we're looking for an opportunity, a gap in the marketplace. We're looking for a need area. And we found it. And that's how Quaker Chewy granola bars was developed. Because the president of the company was sitting in, some R&D people were sitting in, and they were ready to start making prototypes, but they didn't know which direction to go. Should we just do new flavors? Should we do a different shape? It really turned out to be relatively simple, and we have Quaker Chewy granola bars. Has anybody, raise your hand high if you've ever bought or eaten Quaker Chewy. Oh, how satisfying. It's always so nice to know that these products, many of them have stood the test of time. So let me move on, because those are some of my favorites. But now let me talk about Pringles, because Pringles is such an interesting case. When I left Ole Miss in 1968, and I was lucky enough to have a friend who had graduated from Ole Miss the year before, and I said, don't come to Jackson for the wedding, there's not going to be one. And she said, well, what are you going to do? Are you teaching school? And I said, no, I've already canceled my contract with Oxford High School. I'm not going to be teaching because that's not really what I wanted to do. I was programmed to do it. She said, well, let me set up an interview for you at Procter & Gamble. They'll give you a battery test and see if you pass. I didn't know what Procter & Gamble was. I don't mind admitting my own naivete. I didn't know Procter & Gamble. I'd never heard of market research. That's why I say stay open. You're going to hear about things and learn about things that you didn't even think might represent an opportunity. So in the late 60s, this was in development. So again, it's hard to imagine, but try as best you can a world without Pringles. Now, Pringles is not one of those life-saving products, but it's just there's some things that are ubiquitous, like Starbucks and like Pringles, and there were Lay's potato chips, and there were regional brands, but there was nothing like this. In this case, the idea did not start with the consumer insight, but the consumers were brought in very quickly. It began back in the home office where there were teams of people trained to be looking for new product opportunities that would be a high volume, high profit for Procter & Gamble, and it would require hiring engineers, scientists, technicians to have technical installation to revolutionize a category. So some bright team was looking in the snack category, and they're saying, look at this. I mean, this is phenomenal. Salty snacks, America, we love our salty snacks. We really do. And potato chips, even in the 60s, the potato chip segment of salty snacks was 40% and a $1 billion industry. Now you can imagine what it is today. But they're looking and saying, ooh, look at this. This is household penetration, high volume, and we'd have to do more study, but we think it's probably relatively high profit. However, there's a manufacturing issue. Lay's had to build plants all over the country because they're so fragile. How many are still buying potato chips in a cellophane bag? Pringles will never take over that segment of the market. They're always going to coexist. But what was noticed is they had to pack these up in cardboard boxes, load them in a truck, and they had people who were hired, they were salesmen, and they were hired to, their truck would be loaded at the closest Lay's baking plant, and they'd have accounts in a 200-mile radius, and they'd have to drive, and they'd sell and stock the store with the potato chips. And they had to do that. Think of the expense, because nothing could be shipped. So that's where this idea came from. So these smart people looked at the category and said, this category is a huge volume, popular, it's not going away, it's ripe for innovation. So they started the R&D people working on find a way to make a potato chip that can be shipped and will match the consumer need for what they like about potato chips. The taste, the texture, the look, etc. Well, that's no easy task. This was 10 years in the making. Because then we started doing consumer research, and we found that it wasn't one of those screaming needs in the category. Oh, they crumble. I open up the bag, and a third of the bag are crumbs. Now, people were not, you have to really pay attention to the research. Nobody was saying, oh, I hate that, and I'm never going to buy this again. No, they just commented. They're fragile, they're always, and nobody loses that third that are in crumbs. They're eaten somehow, some way, either like this or with the hands, or they're eaten. But we saw an opportunity. Now, I wasn't there. I joined in '68, and where I was in the process, they had already come up with a formula, a batter, made from real potatoes, but they had to make a batter in a shape that was going to, they went through so many iterations, but they came up with that shape that would look like it. They started with something that's going to end up looking like a potato chip, but it had to be uniform so it could fit. And that's where the R&D people came up with that stacking capability and came up with a canister. But by the time I got involved, this had already been 7 years in development. That's how far they had gotten. When I got involved, this had not been branded. There had not been a brand character developed. There was just a white cylinder with these stacked potato chips. Now, don't let me mislead you. This was not easy to affect consumer behavior. They were not early adopters of this newfangled. That's a word that we came up with to a fun way to say, hey, this is different, this is unique. That's not a consumer, that's not a word that came out in focus groups, but we heard enough consumers say, well, this is really different. This is unique. I've never seen anything like it. So, of course, our word people, that's, let me take a break here to say, one of the things I like to say, how lucky you are to have integrated marketing communication, either as a major or to be able to take the components, because everything I learned on the job, every skill, research, both qualitative, quantitative, branding, package design, marketing, PR, advertising, writing, they all work together in the real world. Yes, there are branding companies, and there were several that were hired to come up with what became the brand. There are package design firms that are hired. But it all still holds together. There's a creative brief written, and where this was headed as it was being moved along in the development process was the brand character had to be fun. This is a snack. This is not serious. This is not rocket science. This is not a drug that's going to save lives. This is fun. It's a snack. It's tasty. We want people to want to try it. So that's became the direction to develop a brand character, the logo, like the Pringles guy. And I'll tell you a fun little story. It was crucial that we be in the potato chip category. At that time, there was no legal definition of what a potato chip is. Now, when this was introduced, and it was a shock because we were all sworn to secrecy. I never could tell anybody except my family. I worked for Procter & Gamble. I had a card that said I worked for Grandin Market Research because everything was top secret. P&G was very secrecy or confidentiality oriented. And when this came out, it was a big surprise. It was really revolutionary. Lay's was furious, as you can imagine, and they took Procter & Gamble to court for years to say, but Judge, this is not a potato chip. A potato chip is a slice of a potato, and it's fried, and they said, well, show me. Where is there? There was at the time no legal definition of a potato chip. Eventually, Because again, they had technical insulation, they had shelf presence. Let me show. These are how brands stay on top. Oops, sorry. They just had endless possibilities with flavor and with packaging innovation, the snack size. And these are shipped all over the world. Now, I would not be surprised, I haven't heard it yet, that they are shipped to the moon. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, because anywhere I've traveled, they exist. They're sold on airplanes as a snack. They're in every airport I've ever been around the world. They were loaded onto a boat in a jungle cruise, Coca-Cola and Pringles. And mission accomplished. They found a way to ship and go all over the world, not break. And by the time any competitors came tried to infringe on their ownership, they had already established leadership, and eventually they took away, you see there's no potato chips anymore. They gave up all the legal battles. It wasn't worth fighting. There is now a legal definition of potato chip, which is sliced and so forth, but by then Pringles was so established, and people say, I want to go buy some Pringles. They don't say, I want to go buy that chip made from potatoes from a batter that got spit in a can. So that I want to go buy Pringles. So they have really stayed ahead of their game. Everything I'm showing you, all the various development, utilizes everything you're being exposed to. If you're an IMC major, and even if you're not an IMC major, and you're taking IMC courses, there's everything that works together in the real world. So Pampers was another product that came out of looking at a category that looked right for innovation. And P&G, so we're still talking back in the 60s. And even if you've never diapered a baby, you know what diapers are. Well, there was a time that before disposable diapers existed, there were cloth diapers. Did you start with cloth? You did too? You did. Well, cloth, you had to hire a diaper service. They would deliver these back of pure white, sanitized, sterilized cloth diapers with pins. You had a diaper pail where you put the dirty diaper. The diaper service would come and pick that up, and they'd deliver the new ones. Well, this was another category. Every household that had a baby, and there were plenty in the 1960s, there were diapers. So the R&D people set out to come up with something better, more convenient, less messy, less smelly. But it wasn't until we did what is now called ethnography, but at the time we called it, let's get to know our customer. So I had a team of people, and we would travel around the continental U.S., and we would hire a local market research company to find mothers of infants who were diapering. And they would contact the mother and say, I have a market research person and all credentialed and everything who would like to come and be in the house with you and observe you with your baby and all the things you do with the diapering, and to take notes and to ask questions. It wasn't until we went in those homes and observed. Again, you can't get this from a quantitative study. You can't get this. They got a great idea from reading statistics. But what we observed was the interaction between the mother and the baby in that diapering process. She wasn't worried about smelly, dirty, inconvenient, go empty the solid out in the toilet, put the diaper in a diaper pail. That was a moment of love and bonding between the mother and the baby. So what we learned as the market researchers, as the consumer insight people, we went back, made a presentation to the marketing and the R&D people, and we said, wait a minute, time out. The product benefits may be convenience, but mother, you can never sell it that way. Mother is going to feel she's a bad mother if she puts paper and plastic on her baby, and you're trying to tell her that she's going to have a better experience. You have to buy into that bond and that love. So that's where this headed. So instead of being called easy dipes, it took a long time to convince the marketing and the R&D, because at that time they were all men, and luckily there was a young grandfather in the R&D who had hated changing diapers, and he got it, but they still thought the whole positioning and the new revelation was going to be about convenience and making it easier for the mother. Well, that's the last thing she wanted to hear. She would feel that you are really taking away her role as a good mother. So everything that was developed in terms of branding, packaging, even this photograph, we tested so many package designs. We had portrait artists who did some of the most beautiful portraits of babies and mother. They were rejected because with the photograph, the mother projected herself and her baby into that. She couldn't do that with a drawing, even something beautiful. And so you can see they're appealing. They started just with a basic diaper for newborns. Now there are diapers that are for the newborn up to 3 days. No, it's not quite that segmented, but they are literally for the age of the baby, the weight of the baby. For cruisers, when they start crawling around, when they're they grow up with the baby. These are easy ups, training pants, splashers. You don't want to take that normal diaper to the swimming pool or the beach, do you? It gets soggy and it sags. You want something made for swimming so the baby can get in the water. But it all went back to, we have to project love, pampering. We have the bond, so the name itself, Pampers, pretty obvious. That little graphic of the heart, photographs of babies and mothers, not drawings. And even the language, everything counts, wording. This becomes your billboard in the grocery store. I'm just checking our time. They didn't talk about a functional benefit of the product, a product benefit. It's a baby benefit, baby drive. This keeps baby dry. So every little detail is researched and hammered out, and the way these companies stay on top is by keeping in touch with their customer. They listen, they pay attention to the wording, their advertising, and now you see, they set a standard because the competitors are Huggies, Gloves. So the competitors followed the same, but it took years. They had hired engineers, scientists, and so forth. So when this was introduced, there's no way, not to mention the patent, but there was no way for anybody to manufacture anything close because they had that technical installation with new equipment that was heretofore never existed. So they stay on top. And even with now mothers are used to, now they look for price. Their store brand, they say, oh, I trust Walmart. So the Indian has been so smart. Pampers this is no longer a disposable diaper category. This is called baby care. They have other products and they have a loyalty program. So when a mother has a baby, she goes home with a basket of like Johnson's baby powder, and there's some Pampers, and there's a card to join the Pampers loyalty program. And they get coupons. So they will end up continuing to buy Pampers for about probably less than they pay for Walmart brand. So that, I could go on, but we only have about 5 minutes left, I think, and so I wanted to see if anybody has any questions. Yes, Mr. Lee.
What percentage of the chipmunk the Pringles now have?
They have, let me see, of course I'm not working with them, but as you can see even by the hand raises of people who are still buying in the cello bag, 40%. But that's when we say domestically. But see, where they get is the unbelievable global volume because they can ship everywhere in the world. So they're content to own 40% of the chip market in the U.S. Any other questions or any comment or even to talk about applying integrated marketing communications? Let me see, so,
Can I tell a story?
yes, please.
So I have to tell the story. One of my dear friends is Harold Burson Marsteller, who we all know. And the first time I met Harold, I read about him at the Tylenol event, almost brought down Johnson & Johnson. Someone took capsules out, put cyanide in there, a bunch of people killed. Major catastrophe. Well, Harold Burson was hired to come in and do something for Johnson & Johnson. And I asked Harold, I said, what in the world did you do? Now, this is a case study in every major textbook. It's used in Harvard. He said, oh, hell, he said, I didn't do anything. I hired a sorority girl from Ole Miss. She developed the packaging, was involved with that, and the captain. And she tells me that really didn't happen, but it's a good story Mr. Burson told us.
Well, it is true that out of that, now that you buy any medication, it has triple safety seal and it has safety packaging. That all came after the Tylenol poisoning incident. That didn't exist. Every other company felt we're vulnerable. But my hero is James Berg, Jim Berg, who was chairman, CEO of Johnson & Johnson at the time. 7 people died in Chicago. He went on television and said we're out of the capsule business. Because the capsules had been opened, cyanide put in, back on the shelf, because there was no way to detect that there had been tampering. 7 people died, and he said we're not going to lose one other person. They lost $75 million in one day. And that's why the comeback. I was working on the team for the Tylenol comeback, and it's now the only crisis management case study presented in Harvard Business School. So think about the crises that you read about almost every day. Volkswagen, the BP spill, there's so many. And you think about how they're being handled today. Nothing like Jim Berg. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.